What's your first memorable experience, being in the wild in unique habitats that you've been experienced or you have experienced?
I think that one of the first trips was going to northern Peru because I had never seen discus in the wild, and being out at night at 2 a.m. in a paddle boat with two local guys, and sort of slipping into this dark water with a tiny little flashlight, trying to grab discus that are in between the branches of fallen trees. I think that's like it was a very memorable experience because it was sort of the way that I imagined discus live, but I had only ever seen them in Germany in front of empty wine bottles laying eggs,
Yeah. Excuse me, my coffee went down the wrong way then. I was actually watching one of your videos last night. Now, you've mentioned discus, and you're mentioning that they can handle a lot more flow than what sort of people estimate or believe. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that was sort of the first thing, was like these first trips to Peru, and seeing how discus live there. That's not actually the ideal discus habitat. And I actually think the discus that are near Iquitos, that might not even be a natural population. It might be a population that was released by exporters and that sort of took hold. The actual places that discus are from are much more immediate to the Amazon lowland. So, for example, if you know where the city of Santarém is, it's on the mainstream Amazon, and it has this gigantic loading dock for soybeans. And the girders that hold up those soybean elevators, those grain elevators, they are full of discus underneath them. Like, we went diving there at 10 meters depth. They are just full of discus. So the real discus habitat is much closer to the mainstream Amazon than we imagine. So the mainstream Amazon in the dry season is this sort of, you have these big islands that are sand, and they're covered in reeds in the dry season. In the rainy season, they're then covered with water. But along the edges, there's the floodplain, and in the dry season, the floodplain has these lakes that you have to imagine like a large bubble. So there's the highland above, and the water drains down into this lake from the highland. And the lake is this sort of large round lake that eventually overflows, and the overflow then causes this channel of water that goes into the mainstream Amazon. The discus live in these floodplain lakes at the point where the water descends from the highland and comes in. So these streams are usually, they're not very big. They are we doing meters?
Do anything you want to work with, we can convert it from there.
Yeah, so normally we are talking about 3 to 5 meter wide streams. They are maybe 1 to 3 meters deep in the dry season, and the water is coming off the highlands, off terra firma, so it's flowing quite fast. And in the dry season, this is where all the discus are. Then, when it begins to rain, these large round lakes begin to fill up, and along the edges of these lakes, you have bushes that look, in Canada, we would have alders or salix. You probably have them there too. They're these bushes that they like wet feet. And in the rainy season, they can handle being submerged for several months. They don't die from that. The discus and heros and a lot of the cichlids then travel, up the water column to those areas where those bushes are completely submerged or have just their crowns out of the water, and they're breeding where you have this sort of tangle of branches. And if you've ever wondered why the discus are so compressed and have these vertical bars, I mean, if you imagine it in a bunch of sticks that are sticking up like this, it's the perfect camouflage, but it also allows the discus to maneuver in between the branches like that. So I think that whenever the change of season occurs, the current is much, much stronger. Like, typically, if you're in a discus habitat in the Amazon lowland, it wouldn't be abnormal that you have to hold on with both hands while you're photographing them. So, I use a reef hook, and I would have a harness, and from the harness to the reef hook to one of the branches to free up the hands to take pictures. So the current is much stronger than people would imagine. When the water then fills the lake, of course the current starts to slow down. You can see that quite nicely in the video that, things are all moving because there is current, but they're not moving at a clip where, you would have to hold on to something.
Wow, that's fascinating. Do you think the modern tank-raised discus would be able to adapt to that high flow sort of water conditions, or will they be toning it down still?
I think they would probably be able to adapt to it. Would they be happy with it? Probably not. Would they behave naturally still? I don't know. But certainly the wild discus adapt to that quite well. I mean, I've tried it with a current pump in the tank and so on. That does work without fault.
Yeah, right. What are some of the other fish that inhabit the same sort of, not just locality, but also in that sort of tree trunky sort of area with them?
Well, you would always find heros. Quite often you would find mesonauta, but they're higher up in the water column. They're closer to the surface. You would find the large cranicycla. The place in the video is in the lower trombetas region. So there's Cranicycla marmorata, Cranicycla johanna, Cranicycla lugubris. And then there's a lot of small Cranicycla regani, and I think those are the actual fry predators of the discus because they are quite maneuverable and quite fast. So, they get in between those branches and pick off the discus babies, and there's nothing they can do about it. And they will shield the babies with their body, but those small Cranicycla are very fast. I think they're really they're the perfect fry predator.
Yeah. So when you say shield the fry, I'm kind of envisioning you're up like that and fry on one side and kind of just sort of push them towards a branch or a bit of the riverbank to stop one side of attacking like that, or do they do it a different way?
Well, the discus never leave that tangle of branches, right? So you have this kind of crown of branches and the discus are in between with their babies. If a predator approaches, the discus normally pulls back, which leaves the fry out in the open water for a second, and then it'll go in front and cover them, so they're all on the other side.
Cool.
That's the same way that the discus change babies when you're breeding them in captivity. You'll see that behavior where one will have the babies on it, and suddenly it'll reverse out of there real quick, and the babies are in the water column, and then the next one parks in the same spot, and the babies start feeding on that. So it's the same kind of movement. The babies just don't swim as fast as the parents do.
Yeah, yeah. Have you noticed any difference in behavior in the wild for discus and what it's kind of noted in an aquarium setting?
I think like a lot of the aquarium fish, when we're breeding them artificially, you're kind of losing a lot of the behavior. I mean, the aggression level goes down. Good luck finding a pair of captive-raised angelfish that still guards its babies. But the wild angelfish will try to bite your finger when they have young. So I think that we're kind of breeding this behavior out of the fish by inbreeding and removing the eggs the moment they are laid. With discus, it's the same thing. I think the wild fish are a little bit more aggressive, a little better at defending their fry and their territory.
That's quite interesting because there's always a conversation about how fast, for lack of a better term, we devolve fish being bred in aquarium settings and taking away from their natural adaptations. And like some fish want to be in hard water to soft water, and they can adapt to that. And if you're noticing the aggression levels in the wild still quite strong with fry compared to in the tank, that's not a lot of generational work to have that adaptation dropped back.
Right, but not a lot of breeders would keep a potential predator in the tank with them. So maybe that's all it would take. If you had a couple of giant danios in there with the discus that would occasionally try to snap up one of the babies, probably their behavior would be much more natural. And we just don't give them that opportunity because we are so like, we have to save every baby, including the deformed ones, and raise them all to a good size where we can sell them or whatever. I think it might be as simple as that. It's just introducing the occasional fry predator.